Okay, so we're live now, and we're just going to give the attendees a second. We're also recording. It's still populating pretty heavily there.
So when the students are joining, are they automatically muted? Okay.
Yes, so attendees won't be able to show visual or audio.
Okay, so you are not seen and not heard at the moment, guys. But if you need to communicate with us, just type into the chat and we'll see it.
See the numbers are populating strongly. We're up
Parth, hi Kandarp. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Good afternoon, everybody. We'll begin in just a moment. We're just going to give the attendees about another minute there to join our session. I see the participant number is still increasing.
Anyway, nap time.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jamie Campbell, and I'm the manager of Alumni Engagement, Annual and Legacy Giving here at Georgian College. And it is my absolute honor to welcome you, our participants and students, but also our incredible graduates who have taken time out of their busy days to join us today and share some of their knowledge and experience since finishing their programs at Georgian. Before we do begin the session today, I want to take a moment to begin our session the way we begin all events at Georgian, and that's with our land acknowledgement. Georgian College acknowledges that all campuses are situated on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe people. The Anishinaabe include the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. Georgian College is dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. And at this time, I'll certainly invite everybody on the call to do their own acknowledgement in the chat if you are joining us from an area outside of our catchment area and you wish to take this opportunity to acknowledge your own lands. So joining us today on the call are four incredible Georgian graduates who come with a wealth of experience. First off, we have Justin Schieck, who is an associate full stack engineer and WCAG subject matter expert with Manulife. And Justin graduated from the COPR computer programmer program in 2017. Michael Joyce is a business analyst with the Skyline Group in Guelph, Ontario. He graduated from the Computer Programmer Analyst Diploma program in 2017 before completing his Bachelor in Computing degree thanks to an articulation agreement between Georgian and the University of Guelph. He has worked in development and project management roles in financial services, insurance, and e-commerce, and now works primarily on the Salesforce platform. Ken Munday is the Global Vice President, Product Management at Opacenta. He graduated from the Computer Program Analyst program in 1999 and joined a small software development company by the name of Stone Orchard Software as a programmer immediately after graduating. He eventually purchased the company and became its president and CEO. In addition to this, he's also a volunteer president of the Western Canada Cemetery Association. And our fourth panelist today is Virginia Barlow. And if anybody has been at Georgian over the past, I'll say decade, you've probably run into Virginia because she's actually a four-time graduate from Georgian College. Virginia graduated from the Art and Design Fundamentals program in 2006, and then the Fine Arts Advanced Diploma program in 2009. She's also graduated from the Office Administration program, class of 2013, and the Computer Programmer Diploma program in 2019. And Virginia is currently Georgian's Makerspace Coordinator inside the Henry Bernick Entrepreneurship Center, and is also a member of Georgian's COPR program faculty. So I want to take this opportunity on behalf of our 87,000 proud Georgian alumni around the world to thank these four alumni for joining us today. And I have no doubt that the students on this call are going to find an opportunity to receive so much experience and knowledge from these folks, but do take an opportunity to ask questions as well. At this time, I will hand things over to Beth Salt and Emily Patterson with our Co-op and Career Success team, who will be facilitating today's session. Thank you everybody for joining us, and have yourselves a great day.
Thanks a lot, Jamie. I hope everybody can hear me. So if you don't know me, I'm Beth Salt, and I have been the co-op consultant in computer studies working with Rita Pittman since September 2019. And my colleague Emily is with me today, and she can introduce herself. Do you want to say hi, Emily?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm really excited to be able to do this event with you guys and give you guys good experience to meet everyone.
So we have some questions that we're going to ask the panelists just to sort of give you an overview of who they are, and you've already kind of met them initially, but they'll give you a bit more detail. And then we're going to give you an opportunity. So we're here till 5 o'clock. You've got lots of time. So you can listen to what they're saying first. Please take notes as well. We will provide you with a transcript. Well, not a transcript, but there'll be a recording of this Zoom room. And usually it comes with a transcript so you can read it and see it. And that'll be coming out as soon as we can. Please don't forward that though to people that are not here today. We just ask you not to do that because you've made the effort to be here, and we want to just honor your work, and those that didn't attend can find another way of interviewing somebody. Also, just for housekeeping purposes, if you do have a question, please remain muted and just type your question into the chat, and we will bring it forward after the initial section where the panelists are going to share a little bit from their experience. If you're having any trouble with connection, audio, any difficulty, Erin, can they privately message you, or is the best solution for them to go out of the meeting and come back in again?
The best solution is probably to go out and try to come back. Like you mentioned, they will receive a recording. So anything that they miss as if they get frozen or whatever, they'll be able to catch up with the recording.
Okay, so have no fear, we've got your back. All right, so I'm going to give each of the panelists the same question, and I'll start with Virginia because her last name starts with B. So we'll go alphabetically. So Virginia, we already know when you graduated from all those programs, and you took 4 different programs at Georgian. But could you tell us what your co-op work terms were in computer programming? Can you tell us
yes,
where you've worked since? And then how do you think your education and your co-op experience prepared you for the career you're in now?
Awesome. Amazing. So I am the Makerspace coordinator at Georgian College, and the co-ops that I actually took went through the Makerspace. My first co-op that I took, I was really nervous because I didn't think I knew as much as I did, but I was well prepared once I got in there. The second time I went to do the co-op, I did take it within the Makerspace again because I had big ideas and big plans to make some changes. And I was really enjoying preparing code on things like Arduino and Python and showing students how to use that in their code projects. So I really, really enjoyed that. And beyond that, now that I am actually faculty at Georgian College and teaching client-side JavaScript, I believe that all of these wonderful workshops that I was able to do at the makerspace and building code and showing how to work with code has thoroughly prepared me to become a faculty member and actually be able to teach some of the courses.
That's awesome. Thank you. Michael, would you like to answer the question next? Do you want me to ask it again?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so you graduated in 2017 from computer programmer analyst or computer programmer?
Yes, computer programmer analyst.
Okay, so you did 3 years, 3 co-ops, right?
Mhm.
And can you tell us what co-ops you did, and then what jobs you've been doing since you graduated, and how you believe your education and experience in co-op prepared you for your career?
Yeah, definitely. So 3 years, 3 co-ops. My first co-op was probably my most technical one, which is really scary for your first co-op when you're still super fresh at computer programming. So I worked with a company called Insurance Technology Solutions based out of Midland. They're one you're going to see on the Georgian co-op job postings. You're going to see them under the name Good Enough Corporation, but you'll see them frequently. Great mentor who I worked under there. From there, my second and third co-ops I actually completed at the same place, which is a place called Aveti Commerce. They're located just in the south end of Barrie. And this was less of a development role and more of a QA and project management type role. So this was super helpful with where I am now in my career, in that I had to be the glue between a bunch of different teams. I had to be able to speak to people technically. I had to be able to speak to people who were, more on the business side of things and be able to translate requirements, which is super helpful to gain from that co-op. So since then, I went to university, came down to Guelph, and I've been working for 2 years now with the Skyline Group, which is a wealth management company. So I think Jamie had mentioned a lot of my work is in Salesforce, but it's still fundamentally, it's a lot of that, taking those technical things and taking those non-technical people skills and sort of synthesizing them together to design a solution.
I love it. I always tell students you need the soft skills and the technical skills. Your brain, sides of your brain are about equal. You don't just want to talk about all the great programming skills you have. Yay, I love it. Ken, you're next. Would you like me to repeat the question again?
No, that's okay. I've got the questions here.
Okay.
Yeah, so I graduated a while ago, back in '99, from computer programmer analyst. So I also did 3 co-op placements. My first placement was at a company by the name of Georgian Office Services, where they sold, built, and created computers. It was a great experience just learning how to build computers and what they're all made of and making sure everything works, and a lot of troubleshooting. My second and third co-ops were both at CIBC in downtown Toronto. Also another really great learning experience. What I learned from the co-ops was a great way to build a work ethic and make sure you're learn how to work with other teammates and get some guidance from people who've been there before, and just really start to utilize the skills learned in Georgian. What's a bit unique about me was when I was at Georgian, it wasn't just about computer programming for me. I was a peer ambassador at Campus Connections when that was still around. I was a sports and recreation coordinator on Student Administrative Council. I was very involved at Georgian throughout my time there. And that's been invaluable to me throughout my career. As Beth was saying, it's the soft skills as well. So getting to know other students, getting to do a lot of things around the college and the campus really helps me to grow. I started out as a programmer. When I graduated at Stone Orchard Software, bought it out, and haven't touched code actually in a very long time, but still need to understand everything there is to know about programming, what programmers need to deal with, how they work. And now being a product manager of teams around the world, I have to make sure that I understand their troubles that they're going through, the code that they're using, and different tools and techniques. The biggest thing is everything is changing so fast. You have to try and keep up with all of the different technologies that are going on. So that's been a really big challenge, but it's been a fantastic learning opportunity throughout your entire career don't stop learning when you graduate. You have to keep learning.
That's great. Great advice. And I love the soft skills again. I'm so happy about that. Certainly in COVID, it's really hard for students to get involved on campus because everything's remote. But I think there still is remote peer mentoring taking place, remote peer tutoring taking place. So definitely encourage you to get involved if you can. Last but definitely not least, Justin, would you like me to repeat the question, or have you got it locked and loaded there?
I actually have it pulled up on my second screen here.
Oh,
so no
so
worries there.
organized.
So a couple of the co-ops I did after graduate or during school, in 2016 and 2017, I started as the library navigator for the night shift at the Georgian library. That is actually the year they started doing the 24-hour, right before the exams, the week of 24-hour spans of time. So I was actually the overnight guy as well. During that, I was actually lucky enough to find my second co-op. A teacher, actually a professor, came up to me and he had a business idea. So we went through the Henry Bernick Center and we actually got money for that. So I ended up doing my second co-op at the same time as my first and doing it throughout school year too. So I actually graduated 4 months early with the co-op being done early. And started working there, which was ICANN Interactive. It was started with Ross Bigelow, the previous coordinator of the programmer course. And then when funding kind of ran out for that, they went into hibernation. So I went home to Drayton, Ontario, middle of nowhere. But I got hired on by Manulife and I've been there ever since. During my career there, I've gone from front-end developer to full stack engineer. They did a full rework of their systems. At this point, I would have to say that the education I gained from Georgian, from the co-op, helped me from a different sense of not necessarily the technical sense, because as the library navigator, you're not necessarily doing code unless you do it in your free time. So it helped me more with the soft skills. And with that, I was also volunteering with the Georgian Food Locker. I ended up running the Georgian Food Locker for a year. The Makerspace, I was the president of communications for a little while. Michael was right there with me a lot of the time in the Makerspace. But those soft skills helped me get my job at Manulife. And I highly suggest always doing it. Yeah, there you go. I actually missed out on those. But I highly recommend gaining those soft skills, as they've mentioned, because when you go to your first interview, a lot of the time they look for how well you communicate. And that's kind of the biggest thing with Manulife. They didn't care how much I knew necessarily, because they wanted someone they could put their training into. And what Ken was saying about always learning, when you go to a place like Manulife, and I'm not boasting them in any way, there's constant learning. They have their own little university system in there. So you will always learn. That's the main goal there.
That's awesome. Such good content. And I'm just looking in the chat and no one's posted a question yet. So I'm looking forward to hearing what students are thinking about asking you. So a little bit earlier, we provided the 5 learning outcomes for computer programmer analyst and the 5 learning outcomes for IMDW. Are there any IMDW students here today? Just post yes in the chat if you are an IMDW student. If otherwise, we'll just focus on computer programming learning outcomes if I don't see a yes come into the chat. So the 5 learning outcomes specific for computer programming. Okay, so Nafis is here, so we will cover interactive media design too. Develop, test, document, deploy, and maintain secure program code based on specifications. Use relevant methodologies, policies, and standards to develop secure program code. Use documented solutions to troubleshoot problems associated with software installation and customization. Perform routine maintenance on a database. Apply knowledge of networking concepts to develop, deploy, and maintain program code. So I'm hoping the panelists will each take one and just talk briefly about how your work, your current work, or in your case, Ken, if you want to hark back a little bit in time, depending on how that is relevant for your current work, how does your work relate to that learning outcome? So do you want to start first, Michael, because you dared to smile broadly at the moment when I said, if you're not ready, I'll move on to Justin.
No, I'll go ahead. I'll get the
Okay.
first crack at it so that I don't have to pick from fewer choices.
Fair enough. What's your pick?
Let's go with use documented solutions to troubleshoot problems associated with software installation and customization. Okay, we're on the 30 seconds, right?
It's okay. You can have a minute or two.
Okay, I'm just going to give a brief explainer, just because Salesforce, it's a software that I hadn't heard of before I actually started at my current role. So just to give a little more background for anyone in the chat who's wondering what Salesforce is, it's a CRM system. It's how it started, but at this point, it's a full-fledged platform. So there are a lot of things out of the box that work really nicely together. But there's also a lot of customization that we can tack on to Salesforce. So one of the things that we'll run into is maybe we have an issue with some out-of-the-box functionality that's not working because of customizations that we've added on. This is something that we always try to avoid when we're designing these solutions, but sometimes they just crop up when you least expect them, or a new version of the software is pushed. So there's a lot of great resources out there. Salesforce has great documentation. Always look at the official documentation. It's got, it's the most up to date. There's a lot of great blogs and YouTube channels out there as well. And these sorts of things apply to any technology, any sort of stack that you're working with. Always look at the documentation and then play around with it, test it, see what cases are breaking things and what cases aren't. Use a test environment, feed it a bunch of data that's slightly off, perfect, garbage, see what happens.
Sounds like you have to just venture in.
It's as much as you can read up on it, sometimes you just need to dive in and break something and see why it broke.
So are there any particular resources you use if you're trying to find out more about a product? Do you have a go-to? Are you a YouTuber? Like what's your first go-to if you're trying to find out more?
So my first go-to is the documentation. There's a couple different documentation sites that Salesforce runs. Not a problem. So they have their very technical developer documentation. They have this great resource called Trailhead, which is sort of a learning module platform that lets you learn more about the software. And then they have their architect site. And this is one where they'll talk more about you're trying to optimize the way that your programs are running. So all three sites, depending on kind of the depth of your issue, are awesome. And then Salesforce, because it's a paid product, we actually do receive support as well. So we can enter in a case and say, hey, here's what's happening. Here's what we're expecting. This is what is actually happening. And this is very wrong. And they will have their own support teams that'll reach out. They'll see, are there other clients, other customers who are running into this issue? It might be something that, this is a common mistake, or it might be, oh, cool, there's something really broken with our software. We'll get a team on fixing that.
And Justin's agreeing with you. Okay, so Justin, would you like to go next? I'm giving Ken lots of time.
Sure. Just to quickly comment on what Michael was saying, I am seeing something about you won't get into trouble if you break stuff. A lot of these companies, at least they should, have different environments. So with my question, what I'm going to do is the develop, test, document, deploy, and maintain secure code based on specifications. That's going to roll into what I'm explaining now. So with Manulife, we use GitLab, but now we've moved over to GitHub. And basically this allows us to have good version control and good safe code. So that way, if you're about to merge something in, people can manage that code. Having the different environments, when you pull something locally, you're not affecting the code on the GitLab level, which allows you to break stuff, do it locally. And once you figure that out, you get the fix, you then push that code into the master branch. Now with companies like mine, we have so many developers, we're up to, I think we have 35,000 employees globally. You have to have a lot of layers. So right now we have dev, test, and that's where all the testing happens. Then you have UAT, which is pre-prod, basically we run it through tests like performance and load tests to make sure that it'll stand to our production levels, and then we push it to prod, and that usually is where the customer will then deal with that. As for the process of the develop, test, document, deploy, that's basically what it is. You pull the code, you make the change, and you test it. There's different levels of testing. Always document your changes. That's actually a big thing with a lot of the places I've been, where people don't document their fixes. And like Michael was saying, like, you look at the documentation. So you tend to start missing things. So what I do is when I'm missing something, I go to YouTube and then I go to Google. That's kind of the main sources of information where I go. I learn from videos. So that's kind of where I go first. And then to maintain the secure code, it's all based on security practices based in the company. Like we use New Relic. That's one of the biggest ones off the top of my head.
So you addressed Learning Outcome 1. Did anybody else want to add anything about Learning Outcome 1 that Justin said, or just bounce off from him, or shall we go on to Virginia?
No, I want to echo the documentation comment,
Okay,
though.
do it.
I mean, it's so important to document everything. So many programmers fail to document in their code, in other areas where their company is asking them to document things. And it makes it really difficult, not only for programmers coming in later, but also yourself if you have to go back and review that code, because you're not going to remember what you did a year ago.
We always think we will, and we never do.
Very true.
Okay, lots of questions coming up in the chat, so I'm looking forward to that. Do you want to go ahead, Ken, then, and address the learning outcome, or should we let Virginia go and come back to you?
Oh, no, I'll jump in. I don't mind. Justin stole the one I was going to take, so I'll see if
you
I
can talk
steal
about
one
it
from
too. It's
Virginia.
allowed. There's no rules with that.
No, it's all good. So I'll cover the relevant methodologies, policies, and standards to develop code. The big thing about anywhere you're going to go into, any company you're going to go to, they already have methodologies, policy standards in place. So make sure you're following what they ask you to do so that all programmers are using the same policies and methodologies in order to develop your code. Makes it easier for everybody. And a lot of times when you're going through, you've got so much time to create whatever it is you're doing. They give you timelines, they give you timeframes, and it can be hard to meet those timeframes. And this is where a lot of people start to skip out on the documentation, start to change their terminology names and shortcut through the code. Don't do that. It's going to take you longer, but you need to make sure that everything is done properly. And there's not much you can do. Sometimes you get in trouble from people if you're trying to get things done within the time frame, or you have to work extra hours or whatever, but don't take any shortcuts when it comes to following methodologies and policies. They're there for a reason, and they're very, very important. And yeah, somebody mentioned, as Justin mentioned, you won't get in trouble for breaking things. It's good to break things. You want to break it yourself before it gets out to the public. If you can break things, the more you can, the quicker it can get fixed. And then when you deliver your product, it'll be that much better for it.
I don't think he means you should throw the computer on the floor, just saying.
Oh no, sometimes that's necessary too. It helps. Just not the one you're actually using.
That's coming from your troubleshooting and fixing computer hardware background, maybe.
Yeah, a good hammer is always fun to have handy.
Yeah, we've all been there. Anyone want to add anything to what Ken said before we go to Virginia's?
I'll just add one point, and this is something that I was super scared about when I started my first development job. If you are coming up against a time crunch and you can't get something done, let your manager or your team lead or whoever know, hey, I'm running into some issues with this, here's why. It's going to be a lot better to let them know ahead of time that you're having some issues with getting something developed versus they learn it 10 minutes before they're doing a product demo to a client.
Now, just to add to that, you are a part of a team. A lot of the time you're not alone. One of the biggest things that happened recently, and I'm not going to go into too much detail because of corporation, but DDoS attacks happen. And when that happens, it's usually because of a mistake that went in. We all come together, we fix that, and we do it as a team. It's not, oh, you screwed up, go fix it. Like, it's no, let's do this together. If you can't get it, let's do this. That's the biggest thing, is teamwork. And that's another reason we get the soft skills.
That's great. It's really important. And those of you that are working in a retail situation, or you are working in a restaurant, you have teamwork skills coming out your ears. So be encouraged. Those are skills these employers are looking for. Virginia, last but not least, what would you like to talk about?
So I'm going to sort of talk about the perform routine maintenance on a database. Something that's very, very important. Something that I can tell you from my own experience. If you do not maintain a database, and if you do not store that database somewhere, let's say in the cloud, if something happens and all your data is just stored, let's say locally on a computer, and you lose all of your data. So we are currently in the midst of rebuilding our makerspace, and we are rebuilding an entire database of all the tools, things, and everything that is in that makerspace, so that we can actually have a proper database. So when something comes in, it will be entered into our database. When something comes out, it will leave the database. So let's say if it was damaged, or if it, fell off the table and it's, missing a part. These are things that we want to continue to update and maintain the database, because if we stop updating and maintaining that database, when you have a, catastrophic event, making sure that you can get all of those things back again is going to be a very, very difficult procedure. So making sure to have your databases backed up and that you are routinely working on them is a very, very important thing, which is a lesson that I have learned the hard way. We were in the midst of rebuilding that database when we had an event happen. So now we are redoing it again. And that I would definitely say that having that maintenance is going to be incredibly important for you. And then on the topic of breaking things, I love to go to conferences. That's something that I suggest that everyone goes to do. I saw a comment in there, what else could we be doing, and like, what are our employers looking for? They're looking to make sure that you are continuing to learn and build on that, on your subjects. So go to conferences. I met the Gremlin Chaos Engineering team at the Collision Conference 2 years ago, and we still have conversations back and forth, because chaos engineering is literally breaking stuff to make sure that it doesn't break in the future. So there have been companies, I don't know if you remember when Amazon Black Friday, everything went down. That was a problem that could have been fixed before it happened. And that was sort of one of their main things. So chaos engineering, that whole breaking things in order to fix things and make them better and more efficient, it's definitely on point.
Just to add to what Virginia was saying, when you go to these events, I'm not sure if Georgian is having them now, but hackathons, they were the biggest thing when I was there. I've gone to, I think, 4 in my Georgian life. Went to a few with Michael, and it was 24 hours of hectic fun and coding. But when you leave that, employers do look at stuff like that. Like Manulife was very impressed that you go out and you actually, hey, I went to this and I came back with a second, or I came back with a third. They're like, oh, how'd you like it? And that's how you gain those relationships.
I thoroughly agree with the hackathon. I attend hackathons myself. I was attending them when I was in school as a participant, and now I go to hackathons, and I work as a mentor. Because I work at the Burdick Center as well through entrepreneurship, I'm very familiar with building businesses, but I'm also familiar with the code side. So I can help the students out, either figuring out what they're doing with their code, or also building on those really amazing business opportunities that they're building in those 24 hours. And we will be having another hackathon coming up. It will be a VR hack. So we'll be using Oculus Quests and VR technology in order to get that to work out. We're just sort of stuck in pandemic world right now. So once this once we figure this out, we will be back at it. And it is, trust me, it is going to be absolutely enjoyable for you.
Virginia, just to interject, we had a student in the chat ask any tips on finding hackathons online or places that they can look.
Meetup.com.
Can you post that in the chat just so we can?
Yes.
So there is a lot of stuff going on in the chat, and Emily's been keeping an eye, so she's going to pull up. Just for the sake of the recording, we want to ask some of the questions that I know Justin and others have been answering, and Virginia's been answering in the chat, but we'll just need to read those out for the sake of the recording anyway, and then maybe the other panelists can add to it. Emily, are you ready to start? And then we'll tag team down the chat.
So
Sure,
I'll just copy and paste this into the chat here to everybody, to all panelists and attendees. Major League Hacks has a giant list of all of the hackathons happening all over the place, everywhere. So you can go through that website that I just added, and you can click on the button that's right at the top that says attend a hackathon, and you can find one that's near you, or you can attend one of like thousands of hackathons that are happening like daily. So it's really cool. And it's a lot of fun. Most of them are all digital right now, so you can do it from your home.
I wish I had this a long time ago.
The pandemic has definitely given us some opportunities that we didn't foresee in a good way, as well as the challenges. So Emily, what's the first question you want to present to the panel?
Yeah, so forgive me guys if you have answered them already, because I've been reading the chat as you guys have been chatting, but one of the first ones is, should we master any one language or learn in demand? So if they have an interest in Swift rather than Java, is there one in particular that you guys would recommend?
Just anybody answer? Or?
Yep.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
so I'll start. So it really depends on what you enjoy doing. You don't have to pick what's relevant in the industry. Like for me, for example, I started with, web programming, but I wasn't a web programmer graduate. I was a computer programmer. So a lot of the courses we took were stuff like C# and .NET. I don't use any of those right now. I went directly to MainStack, and we only had one class of that, but that's what I enjoyed doing. Once I got into that, I took stuff like Free Code Camp. I took that to a whole new level while I was waiting to get work. Employers are not waiting for, the best programmer on the planet. They know you're straight out of school. They know you're there for co-op, one or the other. They're not expecting you to be perfect. So I wouldn't necessarily focus on trying to perfect anything in particular.
You don't have to be perfect. I love it. Anyone want to add?
And the big thing, yeah, absolutely. The big thing too is when you're at college, you're learning how to learn as well. You're learning techniques, you're learning tricks. So you don't need to focus in on any one language or any one system or whatever, as Justin is saying. The big thing is employers are looking for who you are, what you've learned, and you can learn anything that employer is doing as long as you've got a good foundation and you've learned all the techniques that you need to learn. You can pick something up fairly quickly at a new company.
I've been having some weird issues again.
There's another similar question in the chat, but I'm just wondering if you want to add anything different. Can you guys recommend some good routines or tools to develop your skills? Is there any other kind of routine?
Hands down, I bought a Skillshare subscription to keep myself up on whatever it is that I choose that I want to, because I make maker nights for the students. So if I decide that I want to teach CSS Grid and Flex in one day, I will go and I will learn how to do it in a couple days, and then I'll be able to teach it to you. Same thing with all the crazy other languages that I've had to learn. It's been just, oh, I need to learn Python to be able to build this. Okay, I'm going to use my Skillshare subscription using YouTube. There's some master's classes out there that are really helpful. And of course, if you are a fan of documentation, like I know most of us are, running through the Mozilla documentation that they have, the MD documentation, that is the best.
Like, honestly, the Mozilla documentation, I use that daily. Like, I've been in this industry for 4 years now, and I'm still looking at the documentation to be like, oh, how do you split a string again? Like, it's something you'll never give up. I highly recommend though using stuff like Free Code Camp. I knew one of the moderators on it from the Barrie campus. Great program to use. It gives you a lot of options. Manulife actually gives us a Pluralsight subscription. So we use Pluralsight for anything like that. And they don't care if you're learning stuff from work, or I've been learning game development on it. Like, they're like, as long as you're learning, we don't care. So on top of that though, Hackerrank is a good one, hackerrank.com. My company actually uses that to test anyone from intermediate above who's applying. A lot of the times when you're applying for an intermediate position, you will be tested. Hackerrank is one they use a lot in the industry. If you need practice, Code Wars, you can create teams and see who's higher on the scoring to kind of compete against your friends. And the last two I would recommend is Algo Expert. Ones like those, so you can practice on it, not only your code, but practice your interview-based code. And the biggest one, once a year, comes out. It's called Advent of Code. It's a fun little thing that every day in December up until Christmas, a new problem comes out. People are waking up at, staying up till midnight, waiting till it comes out and answering those questions. I use those throughout the year. So it's not something you have to do December. It's live all year. I would highly recommend looking into those because they're fun. They teach you new code, and it's a good way to practice.
Yeah, and I guess just a couple more resources. I'm not 100% sure if this is still accurate, but I know that when I was at Georgian, having that Georgian student account gave me access to LinkedIn Learning. I'm not sure if that's still the case, but even if it isn't, if you go out and you get yourself a public library card, you have access to LinkedIn Learning. And they've got a lot of great courses on there. It might not be the same sort of level as Skillshare, but it's really good if you want to just have some background of what can this language do. And another great thing whenever you're going into an interview, if you are somewhat familiar with the language and it's not the exact language that the job is about, be able to talk about like what the difference is between those and what the similarities are, and say, I might not have done any C++ work before, but I'm familiar enough with like the concepts and how it differs from C. And then one more link that I'll just paste into the chat, which is a cool one to get involved with. It's called First Timers Only. It's for contributing to open source software on GitHub. So it's a bunch of like really cool projects where they are very welcoming to people who haven't contributed to an open source project before. It's a great way to learn about working with a larger code base. I'll just paste that into chat now.
So Michael, I just wanted to jump in and ask, because one of the questions we had was any good sites to basically be able to work collaboratively on coding. So would that one that you just mentioned be a good way to do that?
Yeah, so it still uses GitHub. GitHub, you're going to find, is pretty much the industry standard on working with code with other people. But this kind of introduces you to some more projects that exist on GitHub. It kind of curates a list of, these are some projects where the team that's running the project, super friendly and super welcoming to people who don't have 10 years open source experience.
Thank you.
The next question I'm going to pull out is, and this may have already been covered, but I'm not sure, which technology you feel is going to be up and coming in the future in this industry, and how can students be prepared and build their skill set? It does sound like being flexible, being curious, being willing to break things. I'm hearing those themes, but are there any up and coming, like we know Python has become sort of surging up. Is there anything else you're seeing that's really surging right now?
Justin and I are both like, I would probably say anything that is related to AI technologies, because we are definitely pushing more towards the world of AI where stuff happens for you, and you're going to be building that sort of thing. So that would be my up and coming. We just started a program at the college for artificial intelligence as well. So
nice. Yeah, I was going to say anything to do with artificial intelligence, because like there's YouTube videos of like Code Bullet does one where he breaks games with AI. it's all ways to motivate you to learn AI. But I think in my industry, in my end, there's a lot of JavaScript we're going towards. JavaScript's been big for years, and it's actually getting bigger, especially with items like React coming out, which is a Facebook-based framework for UI. So React and Node is a big one in my end, and it just keeps getting updated and changed. And we're actually moving away from our .NET applications because of updating to the Node and JavaScript end. .NET legacy's kind of gone out the window, and that's where we're going. So I would recommend JavaScript, mainly because when I learned JavaScript, I was able to learn other programming languages because of that. Like, they were very similar, built in same ways. JavaScript and TypeScript. TypeScript's very similar to Java. And that's actually coming up too. So TypeScript is a big one that's coming out of the fold, at least in my area.
I would agree. Really push on your like vanilla JavaScript so that you can get your basic and your basics, so that you can actually start implementing all of the new things into your code. So knowing your vanilla JavaScript like to a T, and then being able to build off of that with all of the amazing things like React and Vue and all sorts of frameworks that you can add to it.
Just for the students that don't know what Virginia means by vanilla JavaScript, she just means know your basic foundations, and then you can build from there. Sorry, just if there's any English language learners that have no idea what that meant.
Yeah.
Ken, did you want to add anything? You're sitting there quietly.
No, I like sitting here quietly.
You're doing a great job.
Yeah, mute helps with that. No, Justin and Virginia are absolutely right. It's fun to see new things up and coming. I graduated back in '99. I've seen a lot of new things come since I graduated. There was no smartphones when I was in school. So things change rapidly. So it's just, again, continue learning, keep an eye out on what's changing and what's coming, and just know the foundations, as Virginia was saying. If you've got your foundations down, you'll be okay with whatever's coming. And just, yeah.
Oh, cool.
Emily, do you have a question? I've got one here, but I wasn't sure if you've got one queued up first.
Sure, I do have one. It's for Michael. And again, I apologize if it's being answered, but they asked, which tools do you use for debugging and which tool do you suggest for everyone to use?
Okay. So Salesforce is a little different in that it's a proprietary language, and it exists basically all server side. You don't really do any sort of local development with it because the compiler exists on a server. But there are some debugging tools. If you're working in a test environment, you actually can't manually run code in production, which is kind of a nice thing about their environment. But you can test things, you can look at your debugger. What I would say the best thing I've probably worked with in the past, though, is Visual Studio. Again, like Justin and Virginia had said, like .NET, it's kind of falling out, but there's still a lot of things that are done within Visual Studio, like the more modern kind of reimaginings of ASP. The debugging tools within Visual Studio are the best. Like, learn how to use them, learn how to set breakpoints, and kind of watch as your data flows through a program, see where it's running into issues, see where maybe you even have a line of code that doesn't need to be there because the data is already fine. Yeah, play around with the debugging in Visual Studio, which again, I think with your Georgian College student license, you've got a free copy of.
If you can actually get it working, you can also use Visual Studio Code. I know it's a little more buggy than Visual Studio like 2019 or 2017. But if you can't get the other ones, then Visual Studio Code with the right extensions can give you a good breakpoint debugger.
I do use the Visual Studio Code when I'm teaching. That is one of my favorite code editors to use. It's super lightweight, it's very efficient, and it's easy to find out where you make an error. Even if you're just missing a bracket, there's something that shows you where the error is. And there's things that you can add to it. All the extensions, as were mentioned, it's really awesome.
It's actually also free, and a lot of the extensions are open source projects.
this might be slightly changing the subject, but someone asked a question, what happens at the back end if someone hacks a website? Does
A
anybody want to
lot of
answer?
errors. Okay, well, for example, I'm not a back-end guy. I am a full stack, but it's not my forte just yet. But what we were seeing during a DDoS one time was you see a lot of the web calls, and you don't necessarily see them on the front end because all of the traffic is routed to your servers. So when we looked at the server logs, we seen a lot of 400 requests because they were trying to sign in using fake credentials and items like that. And it would just keep going and keep going and keep going. I think we had like 200,000 calls in like 10 minutes or something like that. But every single one had the same information. So you can really tell like, oh, this is not accidental. This is something's happening. So then you get in there, you either shut down the server or throw up your, what we have is what we call a disaster recovery instance. So we throw up the disaster recovery and then we go into the other server and make the fixes while the other site is live. At the same time, we block the IP of the one that's, DDoSing. And that's kind of what the backend looks like from my perspective when we get those situations. It's very rare that happens, but you never know. Like the one from the other day was from a LG phone from like 10 years ago somehow. So you never really know what's coming.
It's amazing how creative people can be when they want to. Here's another changing the topic question. How often do you guys commit changes on GitHub? I'm not sure if you answered that one already.
That's very situational. So I wouldn't force myself to commit regularly. Okay, well, let me reword that. You do want to commit regularly. I always commit at the end of the day for sure, because then my code is somewhere other than my local laptop in case something happens the next day. I've had my laptop just not want to start the next day. But whenever I make a change that is a fix, I then push that commit. You don't have to worry about that because it is still on your feature branch. So you won't overlay any of the code in like develop or master. But it's usually whenever you make a good change that you want to keep. That's kind of the way I go by it. I don't know if Michael or anybody else has a different way to go about it, but
yeah, that's probably the best summation. The question, like you don't want to really set any limits for yourself of like, oh, I need to commit this frequently. Any sort of company that's telling you to commit, every 15 minutes, commit a change every hour or something, even if you haven't actually made a change because you've run into some weird issue and you need to sit and you need to look at it for 2 hours before you come up with an actual solution. That doesn't sound great to me. It's kind of like that old school philosophy of like, you need to write this many lines of code a day. You should just exercise your judgment of like, this is something that, this fixed something and I never want to have to sit down for another 2 hours and come up with this solution. Although if you've been staring at the code for 2 hours, it's going to be burned into your memory. But you should still push once you've got something that, you're really happy with and fixes a specific problem.
Code making trauma, it's a thing. There are some related questions about backups. So I'll just read them out. Sorry if I'm talking over you there, Em. When should we make a backup? Whenever we're modifying or have a regular schedule? And then if I happen to lose my database, is it possible to back up and restore a database from another location? Does anybody want to tackle that one?
so kind of going off what I said earlier, we have a disaster instance, which also entails having a separate backend. And in this case, it's usually just a copy that we keep up to date whenever we do a major push. Now, this also entails a physical backup, which means we have data centers in other places around in technically the country, but could be the world, depending on if you're a global company, that has your backup installed just in case something happens. That could be anything from an earthquake to a hacker to basically any reason your site goes down. That's when the support should kick in the recovery and the backup of your systems is there. So you'll always have a backup to kind of fall back on. And that's the main thing you want with at least larger companies. I'm not entirely sure about like startups, but it's been a while.
Having been a startup, with a small company, we didn't have our database in the cloud. It was all on local servers. Anytime we were touching our database, even our code, we did a backup, just a manual backup, so we had it, and if anything broke, we could restore. But just we got into the habit of backing up daily, and then so we had your daily backups, then you had a weekly backup, then you had a monthly backup. So if you had to go back, you had all these different backups to go back to. Everything now, as Virginia had mentioned at one point, being in the cloud, it makes it much easier. When it's in the cloud, things are backed up very regularly with Amazon web servers or something. So you can never back up too much.
I've learned that the hard way. Have you got a question lined up, Em?
Sure. So this one's switching topics a little bit, but the student wants to know how important is having a LinkedIn profile for people in your industry?
When I first started school, I would say not at all. But after making my own and then actually also helping other people make their own, I would say a clean LinkedIn profile will get you far. Manulife actually reached out to me, which is rare, to be honest, nowadays. But when you have that kind of profile, you have recruiters coming to you. And if you have the experience or you have just the clean outline and it shows that you put in the effort, a lot of the times you'll get people coming to you, be like, hey, we have a position available. Are you interested in hearing about it? But I would 100% say get your LinkedIn profile up and running, clean, good headshot. Doesn't have to be like professional headshot. My first one was literally someone in the maker's lab taking a picture of me up against the projector. So,
but please no selfies. I beg you.
Yes,
mine right now is not a good example.
It's a great picture, Justin. I would definitely echo that. LinkedIn is definitely important. I do have things on LinkedIn, but it is where that you keep that clean business profile. So, have a friend take a photo for you of you, or, most of our phones now take good enough photos that you should be able to get a clean photo of this much of your head in there in order to use that. Not a silhouette. It's not an artistic piece. You're trying to show off that you are an adult and you're ready to do business, and you want to make sure that other people are like, oh, this person looks like they have their stuff together. That's sort of it.
And in addition to like networking, I also find it's really handy just as a resume, like a backup, because I will usually make a new resume for any job that I'm applying, just so that it's tailored more towards that specific job description. But LinkedIn is a great centralized online spot for me to say, all right, I worked here from this day to this day, without having to juggle 20 different Word docs.
Exactly. I always keep the LinkedIn page, like you mentioned, as a general thing. And when you're applying to positions, at the very least, tailor the cover letter to be for that particular company. A lot of people are just mass printing cover letters. If I'm applying, say, to Manulife, I say, hi, I seen your position on manulife.com. This position, I believe that my skills in this fit this position. If I'm applying to open text, I'll make sure I mention open text and the position I'm looking at, and then I make sure I tailor what I'm saying to that position. It's a lot of work. It does take a while sometimes, but it greatly increases your chances.
And something that I will add to that as well, just before Kenny here, is that if you're doing this and you're doing it with friends, make sure that you aren't all sending in the same cover letter to the same job, because the employer is going to immediately recognize that and probably just push those to the side, because it'll seem like you didn't put in the effort to actually apply for that position. So if one person does a great job at applying to Manulife, and then they're like, oh yeah, just use my cover letter too, change a few things though. A lot of the time the few changes don't happen, and you get a whole bunch of resumes that are all copied and pasted from the same sort of thing. So That's definitely, it's
Yeah,
something that is
exactly. I
very
know we have
recognizable, just like
documentation on
copying
how
and
to set
pasting
people
code.
up
So
on,
Yeah, as much as you want to help your
Salesforce.
friends, don't risk your
They
own
had a
chances
meeting,
by doing
the
stuff like
meeting,
that.
like over a year ago now, remember?
Yeah,
I
and
had
being an
no idea what they were
employer
talking
myself,
about.
I've actually gone through just hiring a bunch of people just recently, and cover letter is very important. That's what I look at first before I even look at the resume. See if you're paying attention, if you've done your history on our company, to see how interested you are in this job. But
Yeah,
LinkedIn, yes,
yeah,
as
LinkedIn
everyone's
is,
saying, it's very, very important.
there was-
And it's very important to keep it updated. Don't let it go stale, as Michael was mentioning.
I know.
But also the great thing about LinkedIn is if Justin or Virginia or Michael or myself, we post something or share something, if you're connected with us, you will
Well, I
see
mean,
that. So you will start to see any upcoming trends or different articles and interesting videos to watch and things.
That's perfect. Thank you, everyone. And I just want to jump on what Ken just said too for the students. If you guys are interested in working at certain companies, it's good to follow them on LinkedIn as well, on top of other social media, because you can see what projects they're working on, if they're hiring, just good ways to connect. But yes, this is why we always tell you guys how important LinkedIn and also tailoring your resume and cover letter is.
That
I
was
do
a
have
Listen
an-
handy
to your career
segue.
help.
yes.
Listen to your career helpers. They
You've
get you
just-
far.
You've just absolutely justified everything we've said in the co-op prep class. So both Emily and I are thrilled, and we're just
We're-
beaming for a reason.
I was gonna say we're smiling ear to ear the whole time.
Yeah, we're just so
Um,
happy you said that.
I do have another question lined up, if that's okay, Beth.
Yep.
So this one has to do with if students are currently in the computer programming course and they're not sure exactly what they want to do after graduation, do you guys have any pieces of advice on exploring different career paths or different avenues that they could go down?
So
do you mind if I go first, Justin?
Yeah, you go ahead, Ken. You have the most experience there.
Yeah, I've been around for that one. The great thing for me, especially at Georgian when I went to computer programming, you got a base understanding of programming, networks, database. You got an understanding of what all of those different areas were. So find out what is really interesting to you and what gets you excited, and start down that path when you graduate. But don't worry about, okay, you're going to make the wrong decision going down a path. You can change things later. You can change to a different direction. If you started out in programming and you want to get into the database side of things, you can do that. So don't be afraid of being locked into one thing when you graduate.
We do.
But yeah,
Let me just find it.
figure out
I
what you
don't
want to
understand
do
it
is
at
always a
all, but
good thing once you're.
We did talk about that.
The big thing for me is do what you love to do. Don't do something you want to work to live, not live to work.
Do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life.
Yeah, it's true.
Virginia, Mike, did you want to say anything before I hop on this?
Oh, I mean, I've been to school 4 times. So like my main thing is like, keep doing stuff and keep learning. And if it doesn't work out the first time, it's okay to go back to school. It's also okay to not go back to school and just do a little bit of job hopping. I know that how I really found my personal passion, which is makerspace coordinating and workshops and teaching, was actually through when I came back to school, going through computer programming. I learned that I had skills because we had to do certain things in computer programming, like, you know, screencasting and little things that start adding to your sort of like, you know, your glass of all the cool things that you can do. And then just start thinking about those things and really be like, okay, do I really like to do this? Or am I doing this because, you know, my mom and dad want me to do it? I went to art school first, so.
Stereotypical mom, I'm going to art school. Nope.
Too expensive to be a doctor.
Mike?
Too much
Yeah.
blood as well. Go ahead, Michael.
The only thing I could really add on to all these other responses, because they've been awesome, is look into volunteer opportunities. Obviously, it's a little harder right now with COVID and everything, but volunteer opportunities are a great way to learn about maybe different organizations that you haven't really thought of in the past as, you know, a career, but you'll find every single organization you're wanting to volunteer with that, you know, kind of strikes some sort of passion. They either need something done with technology, or they need something, like they have no idea where to start with technology. and they need someone to kind of tell them at least what is going on in the world of tech right now. Like I was able to get a great volunteer position with the CMHA, the Canadian Mental Health Association in Barrie. They are 2 people in their IT department serving the entire area from like Newmarket to Bracebridge. So they've got a lot of projects. If mental health is something that interests you at all, giving back to your community in any way, that's a great first place to start.
Yeah, to play off that, volunteering is a big thing to find your passion. Like for me, between the hackathons and everything else, I was also part of the Georgian Green. I was the food locker prez at one point. On top of that, I volunteered in many different organizations. Seriously, just ask your professors. During my dynamic presentations course, I actually talked to, I think is Travis Doucette, I think was his full name. But he was the professor. I talked to him, I said, do you have any volunteer opportunities? He was starting actually with the Barrie Historical Museum online. He's like, we need people to upload to WordPress. And that turned into me doing WordPress work for ICANN Interactive, which was my co-op and startup. And then when I left there, WordPress turned into React and JavaScript and PHP for Manulife. So you'll find the route. Originally, I didn't think I was going to be going for web design. Ross Bigelow and I had a plan literally from year 2 all the way through to the very end. The plan was finish the course, and he was going to recommend me for the Ontario Institute of Technology game design course and knock 2 years off of a university course there. But I was just so done with school, and I found a different passion that I went down a different route. That's not saying I won't go back and do that, because, you know, people tell me all the time in this industry, like every 2 to 5 years, people will move around. That's okay. That's going to happen. Eventually you'll find what you love to do. You'll find stability and you'll stay there. I've been at Manulife almost 5 years. Do I want to move? Not quite yet. So I'll stick around a little longer.
I think that's an important thing.
What's up with that? Sorry, Virginia.
Sorry.
No, programmers like to move around. I've seen that over my career. I've had programmers come and go. It seems to be a 3-year cycle for a lot of them. It's okay. They've come in, they've learned everything they can learn at my job, and then they go to another job. They go somewhere else to learn more and get more experience.
A lot of the time, it's also promotion. It's a lot of the time it's promotion based as well. Like to go up to intermediate in my position, they're basically telling me, yeah, you need to leave and come back. So it's one of those situations too. Like there's so many different reasons to move around that you'll find that one place eventually. Just find that passion.
Yeah, and Michael's absolutely right with the volunteering. I love that answer. If you volunteer, especially now since it's so difficult, you go out, get a volunteer job. I had somebody come and join me. I was a small company, couldn't afford to hire anybody. They came in, they volunteered, and they turned that into a job. I was able to get enough work done and gain enough revenue from that they built themselves their own full-time job with our company. So
another thing to add there, when Justin was speaking about how Ross and him had like sort of worked together to talk about it, you know, the plans for future. It is okay to ask your teachers about that and get that awesome mentoring experience from them. I know that I have spoken to many of my teachers, both past and present faculty that I know, for mentoring. Sometimes I have questions that I can't answer, and I will mentor students and people as well to make sure that, you know, if they really want to do something, if they're really passionate about entrepreneurship and they want to start their own business, I'm definitely going to be someone who's going to mentor that student to make sure they're getting the right, you know, the right path, if that's their passion. But that's one of those things that I think is really important. I know that I have a mentor at the college who's very important to me, and I think finding that mentor is an important thing to do as well.
So there are some questions in the chat, but I think they've been answered just about how to keep yourself current, and you shared a lot of resources. So students, if you've missed those resources, just scroll through the chat and you'll see both Justin and Michael have suggested quite a number of different resources. And I'm seeing Discord, I'm seeing Facebook groups. Do you want to talk about how social media plays a role in you keeping current, if it plays a role other than LinkedIn?
So a lot of the people that I work with have actually gotten rid of Facebook, and items like that. They stick to Twitter, but mainly that's because, you know, my friend loves the guy who created React, so he's all over that. But a lot of the times it's just Twitter, and that's really all we stick to for a lot of the social media aspects. I even got off of Facebook. I haven't used it in months, but social media doesn't necessarily give us the information we need. A lot of the time it's conferences and stuff like the ones I've posted, like Spectrum and dev.to. Dev.to is a good one. LinkedIn is a big one if you want to consider that a social media, which technically it is.
Perfect. Anybody else?
Yeah, I would say that's about it. LinkedIn and Twitter. Twitter is super popular, at least where I'm the most familiar, which is the Salesforce community. There's also a lot of good Slack channels out there. If you ever want to take a look, one I know of offhand is Toronto JS. Haven't been there in a while. I'm not sure if it still exists because I'm not a JavaScript person anymore. But if you are at all interested in learning kind of where the JavaScript ecosystem is headed, Toronto JS, awesome, good way to get in touch with people as well and ask, hey, I ran into this issue. Are you able to help me with it? And also just build those connections that, you know, they'll let you know if there's maybe starting to hire at their company.
I'm just going to throw in the chat here. It's not North TO, it's North OT.
North of Toronto, yeah, I was thinking about that
north
too.
of Toronto.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, that one. That one.
There's another one north. I'll have to get it, but the one I'm thinking of is the one that's based out of Kitchener.
Yeah. So there's a couple of them where they'll. So I put the website up here where you can actually go to tech meetups. Once we get back to in-person learning, we do host the North OT tech meetings at the college. We do food and bevies, so it's really fun to come and have a snack and learn some code and listen to some amazing alumni and speakers and people who are just building crazy things. So it's really cool to come and just check out what everybody's been building.
Emily, are there any other questions that we've missed? I would like to allow just a little bit of time to talk about the interactive media design web learning outcomes, just briefly for the sake of the students from IMDW that are here.
If you don't mind, there was one question that I found really interesting that I'd like to know the answer for.
Yeah, go for it.
As you're all working for different companies, thank you, Kenil, for the question, by the way. How do you stay motivated at work?
Take breaks. So it's funny. A lot of the time, so actually I'm an advocate for WCAG, and that's because at a late age, I was diagnosed with reading disability / ADHD. So for me, when I get really focused into something, I tend to hyper focus. And that basically means I could sit at my desk from 8 a.m. to 12 a.m. and not eat, move, sleep, or anything. The thing I had to drill into my head, especially as a programmer, is to get up from your desk once every 1 to 2 hours minimum, walk away, come back, and make sure you separate work and home life. With work from home right now, I'm in a bachelor apartment. This is my whole apartment behind me. It's like a 20 by 20. It's hard to break up that home life balance. So what I do is I work in one spot and I play in another, and that breaks it up for me. It gives me more motivation during the day. Another big one is I lost it.
I will reflect that work from home being super difficult. This is my podcasting studio. It is in the front room of our house, and I do the same thing as Justin. I have a place for work and a place for play, so I can do gaming on my PC upstairs, and then I have my main setup down here for work. But with my job, I never get bored because we are consistently pivoting and changing, and I'm always making sure that I'm learning something new. And I think that's a big part of it, is that I'm pushing myself to learn something new, so that I can share that knowledge later. And that keeps me like agile. And I have learned how to do put videos together now. I do audio and video and podcasting and webcasting, and just put everything together. But we're still doing coding and we're still doing everything else. So it just continuously, with my current position, it is just change all the time. And it's great to have a position that I can have that sort of freedom to have that like change.
Just remembered, when you get stuck on a problem, something Ross always told me, and what some of the students actually did. The thing I loved about the makerspace is we got to 3D print little items when we first started up, because when we first started, it was just like one 3D printer and we all wanted to play with it. So we printed out little things. I still have mine. It's a little Totodile from Pokemon somewhere, but basically talk to it. I know how stupid it sounds and how crazy you'll look, but it'll help you get past those problems. You somehow think clear when you talk to, if you don't have that team with you, you talk to an inanimate object and suddenly things become clear. Don't know why. It's always worked for me.
Verbal processing is a thing.
I think a huge part of that, Justin, is just thinking out loud. I find sometimes our brains can get really cluttered when we're trying to think about stuff. If we just take a breath and just talk out loud as if we had someone else in the room, it makes it better.
Yeah, the big thing for me is the same. I've been working from home for years, and I have a completely separate space. I have a door for my office. I leave the office, I close the door, I'm done work. I don't think about work when I leave. But throughout the day, I get up, I go for a 15-minute walk. I get outside and go for a walk around the block and come back in. The fresh air really helps refresh and keep me motivated and moving and thinking properly.
Where I'm going
But
after
as
this.
Justin said earlier,
It's beautiful
as
outside,
Justin
right?
said, yeah, so nice. Yeah, we're gonna go for a long walk. But as Justin said, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. That's a big thing. If you're really stuck and you're not enjoying it, start thinking about is that right for you?
I guess the only other bit that I could add on to that, because going outside and having that separation of work and life, those are the two key things. But another part of it is it's kind of, I don't want to say it's luck, but like I lucked into the fact that I have a great team that I can rely on. But also recognizing that that's not just luck, because I'm also part of that team. So make sure that you are kind of open and there for your colleagues. As much as you want to go to someone on your team and say, hey, I've been struggling. I've been like banging my head against the wall trying to figure out this one issue. Are you able to help me out with it? It's also important to remember to be there for those people on your team when they come to you and they say, hey, remember, this issue that I was having a week ago? I'm still having this issue. You mind if we like talk it out? Again, you can always fall back on talking to an inanimate object. I've got that little mushroom lamp behind me. That's my go-to. It even lights up. It's really cool. But being there for people that are actually on your team and reciprocating kind of that support that they give you is super important too.
Yeah, and as somebody mentioned earlier, communication. I can't remember if that was Justin or somebody else. Communication is key in work. Communicating with your boss, if you're having problems, communicating with your coworkers, as Michael said, you need to be able to communicate and communicate well with everyone, especially if you're having problems.
Yeah.
There's those soft skills again. We do the same thing in the co-op office. I really love to connect, as Emily will tell you. I love to connect every day. Just check
So
in.
do I. So it
You
works
just
out
gotta,
well.
you just gotta remember, everyone has their bad days. So if someone's having a bad day, come back to them a little later. Like that's the biggest thing. I'm a very open person. Hell, I brought up ADHD earlier. When it comes to my team, I'm very straightforward, and I tell them that the minute I meet them, I say, hey, just to give you a heads up, I'm very straightforward. If you ever have an issue with me, please come talk to me. I'll make sure I never mean anything I say in a bad way. If I'm in a bad mood, I will come and talk to you after. Let's do it together. Like, you always create that open space, because if you're really tight and recluse, you'll never get anywhere.
I'm just going to add to that. There was a question, what kind of tools or apps do you use for networking with other developers? So I go to places, I go to events, I go to conferences, I go to at least one conference a month. Some of those are conferences that we at the Burnick Center are putting on. Some of those conferences are like Collision. There's a whole bunch of entrepreneurship ones that I've been going to, but there's a whole bunch of like Collision style, coding style, developer style events that you can go to. And don't be nervous about if you see a speaker and you're like, holy cow, wow, you blew my mind with that, last little bit at the end. And I can't believe you built that. Like I met the person who built Bitmoji. That was so cool for me. So like, don't be afraid to actually message them. We're in a digital world right now a lot of the time. So don't be fearful to say, hello, you really blew me away with that last topic. I'd love to connect. It's an exciting feeling. Sometimes it's back and forth, but a lot of the times they will be open to connecting.
So I hope it's okay just to spend a few minutes just to go over the learning outcomes for web design. So I'm going to read them all because I think we can probably address them as a group. Use best practices and tools to design and develop dynamic, rich media content for the web. Use creative and critical thinking techniques in the effective design, development, and implementation of an interactive web-based, I guess we'll say object. That sentence didn't get finished. Complete both individual and collaborative interactive media projects effectively for the web. Build effective and dynamic websites and or mobile apps. Contribute to the assessment of the requirements of an interactive media web project. So we've already talked about project management. We've already talked about collaboration. Is there anything coming out that any of you feel like we haven't really talked about that you would like to bring forward?
Design.
Yay, we have not talked about design.
Yes, so getting your design skills up is super important, especially if you're going to be in web design, whether you're front end or if you're just doing a little bit of back end and then you end up getting pulled into the front end because that happens, it just happens. And designing doesn't necessarily just have to mean doing the things on the website. Learning about color and learning about those theories, learning about, what is, I think it's ARIA.
AOTA.
Like,
AOTA WCAG.
Yeah. So learning those is going to tremendously help you to build your websites out and give them good design as well, because that's the first thing that people are going to be looking at. And then the second thing that goes beyond that is your user experience. It takes about like 3 seconds for someone to decide whether or not they're going to stay on your website. If it's already bothersome and there's something that in the user experience that is terrible, like I have to click the button twice in order to get to a certain page, I will go somewhere else to find my information. Like it takes me several seconds to just be like, nope, not worth it.
Yeah, that's user experience at its finest. I didn't graduate from this course, but being I went down that route, I do have some experience when it comes to some of the items we use when it comes to web design. The reason I went down that road is I'm very creative. I'm a very DIY kind of guy. So I was actually cook for 10 years, and the creativity I had in that pushed me towards the web development. Now to go into more of the skills, what Virginia mentioned about AOTA and WCAG, ideal. Definitely look into that because websites are starting to have to be AOTA compliant to a AA standard. Now, basically that means if you're blind, you need to be able to navigate your site. If you're a little slower mentally, you need to understand your site. If you are hyperactive, like Virginia said, with the loading times, Manulife had a 15-second loading time at one point on the legacy site, and that was the big problem. They wanted us to get it down to like 3 seconds because of that focus time. A lot of the applications we use, especially for AOTA, which is actually WCAG. AOTA is kind of the broader sense. It's the parent to the WCAG. WCAG is the web standards. The Lighthouse, it's built into Chrome. is a big one we use. We run it on all of our sites to get a decent score and see where our problems are. I would highly recommend when you're designing to do the same thing. It'll tell you if a color contrast is off. It'll tell you if text is too small or too dark or too light on a background. Those are big things for people who, and you kind of overlook that. When I was in school, I didn't think of that stuff. But when I started learning about this, I'm like, how does anyone blind actually navigate our sites? Like, and when people come and ask me, because I'm a subject matter expert in this field, they ask me, how do I test this? I'm like, close your eyes. Like, if you can get to where you need to go, you've done fairly well. And then you just do the scan and you figure out where else you've gone wrong. Just think about things like that and your design will be fantastic.
I'm just going to plug a really cool app in the chat right now as well, because Justin had just touched on briefly about like when you're actually making text for your site. So when you're actually thinking about what the wording of your content is, you want to make sure that it's the most accessible that it can be without changing the meaning of what you're actually writing. So this app is actually really neat. It'll give you an estimate of like the grade level that your text is at. So can your text be understood by someone with a grade 6 or grade 8 level education? Or is your text so difficult to understand with your word choices, with your sentence structure, that you need to have like a university level education to understand the content on the website? So whether or not this falls into your specific role when you're doing a design job, you're probably not the same person who's making that copy, but in some smaller businesses, you might be. So it's something that's always really good to keep in mind.
Saving this site. I had no idea it existed. That's really cool. See, we're networking.
I love it. Well, I'm hoping you're taking away something because you've given us a lot today and really appreciate that. Is there any final housekeeping we need to do, Erin, before we end the session? I see that the chat has slowed down, so I think we've answered pretty much everybody's questions. Unless there's any questions.
So. Yeah, unless there's anything that our panelists would like to.
And I'm going to send off my cat because she's ready to jump on my laptop. I saw you were fending off your cat earlier, Virginia.
It can only last for so long, right?
Yep.
No, if that's everything, students want to take one last opportunity. If you have any outstanding questions, to post them in the chat. I saw the panelists have all very kindly provided their LinkedIn profiles. So students, if you do want to connect, please include a note so they know that you attended this session. That is a very wise professional way to go forward. And I guess, oh, sorry. Go ahead. I was just going to say, like, as just to kind of go back a little bit on mentorship, as part of the Alumni Association or a representative from the Alumni Association, number one, I want to thank all of our panelists because this has been amazing. I've learned so much and a lot of things that I didn't consider when I was putting together this panel with the help of our co-op colleagues. Your Alumni Association also has different resources. So when you do graduate, we do have the Alumni Mentorship Network. So the Georgian Alumni Network, again, that we lovingly call it, which is where I found most of our panelists for today. So it is a one-on-one alumni mentorship network. So when you do graduate or when you apply to graduate, you can you'll find the link for the Alumni Network and you'll be able to register for that. There's also a lot of different resources to help you with resumes and networking through our employment community services department. So there's a lot of different resources out there, and we're more than happy to help our graduates in any way that we can. But yeah, so I'd like to, sorry, I just something came in, a question came in. I wonder what information we'll put on our co-op. Oh, it's about co-op project. So yeah, so from my standpoint, I want to thank you guys so much. This has been an amazing learning experience for me, and I really hope that you guys enjoyed yourself and enjoyed today's and helping so many students with their co-op project.
It was
Thank you,
definitely nice to
everyone.
talk to somebody.
Yay. It's nice to see you. And Justin, I remember when you worked in the library, because I was working in that area
Right.
then.
Yeah, that's right.
I also remember you working in the library. It wasn't just the makerspace that you looked familiar. Like I've seen
No.
your
Me
face
too.
before, but I definitely was in school when you were doing that.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
and Michael, somehow you slipped under our radar, but it was nice to meet you, and nice to meet you, Ken. I just want to do one. I do want to answer that one question about the projects. The student asked, "How will we know that you attended?" So we do have an attendance sheet today. Students who attended or registered will receive a link to the recording of this session, and we will email that to you. So as I said at the start of the meeting, if anyone joined afterwards, please do not forward that email to a student that's not here. It's for you because you took the time and made the effort to be here today. It's not for students that did not register and did not attend. So we will be checking. And if you are on the list and you're here, we already know about it. Big Brother is watching you. We're not creepy stalkers. We have a list and we will check it when we mark your projects. So if we see you on the list and you've written about this session, you're good to go.
Yeah.
So huge thanks to our wonderful panelists.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Really appreciate your time and your wisdom, and the students are all saying thank you. And
thank you to the students for being so interactive in the chat. That's
great
amazing.
questions. You were asking
really
great
great
questions.
Yeah, well done. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. So as soon as the recording is done, I think tomorrow there will be an email sent out with the links. So
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, everyone, have a great evening.
have a
Enjoy
great
Thank
the
you all.
weather.
Thank you.
Everyone
Enjoy
go on
the
a nice
sun.
long walk. Move your
Yes,
legs.
enjoy the
Yeah,
Get
sunshine.
outside.
that's what I'm about to do.
Same.
Yep. I think
All
we're all
right.
heading there.
Yeah, take care, guys.
Well, we can.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, guys.
Bye.
Thanks, Erin.
That was
Thanks,
great.
Beth. Thanks, Emily. Really appreciate it.
That was awesome.
Oh, wasn't it though? Such a
Yes.
great, like that time like flew by, hey?
Yeah, I was like, we're here till 5, and then I was like, it's almost 5. Like,
Yeah.
holy
I looked
cow.
down, it was like 1:45. I was like, oh my goodness, what?
How did we get here? All right, thank you so much for having me on this panel. This is wonderful.
Oh, thank you so much for agreeing to join us.
Exciting.
I learned
I
so
love to
much.
share knowledge.
Yes. Well, don't we all, right? I mean, like
Yes, exactly.
that's the whole joy of everything. And,
All right, at some
yeah.
point, I'll show you how to quilt. How's that?
Yes. I
Yes.
love it.
We can have a quilt lesson at some point.
That'd be great.
Do it on Zoom.
Oh my
Okay.
goodness. I know I don't even have like a sewing machine, so we'll have to
You can do it
look
by
into
hand.
that.
I do it all the way.
You?
Yeah, I do. I worked at a quilt shop, and I did like I taught children how to quilt a whole quilt on the go. Like I've done all the things.
Oh my
Because
goodness.
why not? Like,
Well, that's it. I knit. I don't even like sewing in my ends, so
this knitting is something that my hands can't they just don't. They're just like, what are you trying to do?
yeah, I can handle like the 2 sticks for some reason, but like crochet and sewing, it just my one hand is like, why am I doing this
What is
alone?
my purpose? What am I doing?
And my other hand is like, use me, please.
I'm tired now.
Yeah, I need
All
some
right.
help.
Thank you so much for having us.
No problem. Talk to you later, Virginia.